ASEAN Way for Data Protection and also AI Governance, which is relative to its counterparts in the EU and most of the West. We focus here more on soft laws and attempting to be ethical. So this morning, during the public lecture, Prof. Ang said that ethical frameworks are useless. I would like to respectfully disagree with that, and I'll let you know why in the coming slides. So here, me and my boss, Benjamin Ang, we looked at ASEAN on a regional level and also on a country-by-country assessment. And I do note that we have people here from across the region, so if there have been some updates, feel free to let me know later. Yeah? Okay. So ASEAN navigates rapid digital transformation. Its strategy leans on non-binding frameworks that promote trust, privacy, and human-centric innovation. So it's mostly guided by the ASEAN Digital Master Plan of 2025, where member states are rolling out voluntary principles-based policies to support cross-border data flows and AI governance without the heavy-handed legal mandates such as the ones that they have in the EU. So these soft law approaches give countries flexibility and help regional interoperability. But of course, challenges in our region remain, like fragmented laws, weak enforceability, and growing concerns over AI misuse. So as AI becomes more widespread, there's increasing pressure for stronger and more harmonized legal frameworks. So in short, ASEAN, our region, needs to balance innovation with more binding safeguards to ensure ethical AI deployment and maintain trust in the digital ecosystem, with data protection at its core of this evolving governance landscape. Okay, so personal data protection is becoming increasingly central to AI strategies, and this is not at all surprising because AI relies heavily on huge amounts of data. So across Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries are embedding data privacy laws to their broader digitalization policies, and this reflects a commitment to technological growth that's both ethical and also human-centered. So on the economic side, the focus is on driving competitiveness, innovation, and growth. This is in the private sector, including tech companies and investors. At the same time, development programs for inclusive and sustainable outcomes, working with governments, NGOs, international agencies, and local communities. So in short, AI regulation in the region is evolving on both fronts, balancing both economic growth and ethical development, and data protection sits right at the heart of responsible AI governance. So the ASEAN Digital Master Plan sets out a vision for a resilient and inclusive digital future, and this has a strong focus on trusted digital services. So a key part of this is strengthening our data privacy and security frameworks, which are essential for cross-border digital trade and building user trust. So this master plan also lays the groundwork for interoperability and international standards, such as the APEC cross-border privacy rules and the EU's GDPR, which is an important step toward more harmonized governance in ASEAN. Also, everything that I'm talking about is in our full paper, which I think will be made available to you. So don't be overwhelmed with all these acronyms that I'm throwing at the audience right now. Okay, so that said, this master plan needs an update. It currently gives little attention to emerging technologies. It does not even mention AI across 140 over pages. So that's a problem because AI has been growing in impact in the region. So when it comes to AI governance, ASEAN tends to favor soft laws, so things like voluntary guidelines, ethical principles and strategies over sweeping, rigid regulations. So the idea here is to allow flexibility, since member states differ a lot in politics, laws, economies, and tech maturity. I think this has been said to us over and over again during the strategic conversation earlier. So ASEAN does things this way to support innovation, though it doesn't mean that there aren't yet binding measures to safeguard human rights like data privacy. So this approach ties into ASEAN's bigger role of becoming a digital society, but progress has not been smooth. So the ASEAN Digital Master Plan is terribly outdated with no mention of AI, and this was back in 2021. But I must say that the region has been catching up for AI. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that in February 2024, ASEAN already released its guide on AI governance and ethics, which highlights transparency, fairness, accountability, and privacy. So again, it's not binding, but at this point, that's actually the point, because it lets each country adapt governance to its own needs without slowing down anybody's innovation. Still, there's no uniform regulation across ASEAN. Each country has its own data protection laws, reflecting their different systems and levels of development. So this flexibility is somehow useful, but if ASEAN really wants to keep emerging tech, such as AI, safe and human-centered, stronger legal frameworks will eventually be needed. So this urgency is actually growing. Just think about the deep fakes being used in elections. So this was quite rampant in Singapore, in the Philippines, I think in the past Indonesian elections as well. So yeah, the impact of AI is growing and growing in society today. But the challenge is, unlike the European Union, ASEAN is not a supranational body. So the member states keep their full sovereignty, so region-wide binding regulations will be hard to enforce. Okay, so we look at a country-by-country comparison, starting with Malaysia. So like much of ASEAN, it relies on soft laws with national strategies and voluntary guidelines supported by data protection reforms. The Personal Data Protection Act of 2010 regulates personal data in commercial contexts, while Malaysia has the 2024 Cybersecurity Bill, which strengthens data protection and safe AI use. So they have a national AI roadmap of 2021 to 2025, which unites government, industry, academic, and civil society to promote responsible AI across sectors. And this is guided by principles of fairness, accountability, and transparency, very similar to the ASEAN way. So complementing this, voluntary national guidelines on AI governance and ethics emphasize also fairness, safety, and human centricity. And in December 2024, they had the National AI Office. So they established this to coordinate policy and align with global best practices, but gaps remain. So for example, their Personal Data Protection Act excludes government agencies. So that's kind of a gray area there. And again, the non-binding frameworks limit enforcement and legal challenge mechanisms. So for the Philippines, we blend existing laws, global ethical standards, and a national strategy to guide AI responsibly. So central is its Data Privacy Act in 2012, requiring informed consent for automated data processing, and also a National Privacy Commission registration. So in 2024, its guidance clarified its application to AI. So there was an update there. So the country also draws on UNESCO's AI ethics and the Bletchley Declaration to promote fairness and accountability. And it also has an AI roadmap similar to Malaysia, 2021 to 2024, which emphasizes infrastructure, R&D, and workforce upskilling, supported by various laws. So AI is also applied in governance. So I mentioned the elections before. So in the Philippines, we have a commission on elections that mandate transparency to combat disinformation. And so public participation, however, remains limited, though the Philippines supports ASEAN-wide AI governance cooperation. Okay, moving to Indonesia, much like Malaysia and the Philippines, it takes a phased and principles-based approach to AI regulation. So in Indonesia, they build it on existing laws and they draft comprehensive governance structures. So there is a personal data protection law, and I realize I might be preaching to the choir here. I'm sure you all know what I'm discussing right now. So the PDP law regulates data use and transfer, while there's an updated electronic information and transactions, or the ITE laws, which recognizes AI as an electronic agent, holding operators liable for AI actions. So there are other rules in the country, including Government Regulation Number 71 of 2019 and a 2023 Ministry of Communication and Informatics Circular, which promotes security, transparency, and ethical AI use. And this is used within fintech and banking, guided by the Financial Services Authority, or your OJK, for ethics guidance. So Indonesia has a national AI strategy, a bit longer than Malaysia and the Philippines. For this one, it covers 2020 to 2045. And there's a forthcoming presidential regulation on AI governance, which aims to unify ethics, talent development, and digital infrastructure. So this blends domestic values like your Pancasila with global benchmarks as well. So again, there are some gaps in Indonesia with weak enforcement, limited operational safeguards, and insufficient protections for affected communities. Okay, so for Thailand, Thailand's AI governance integrates data privacy, risk-based rules, and also ethics. They also have their own Personal Data Protection Act, which underpins their AI policies. So you see a growing trend here, PDPA, PDP law, and then AI governance. So this requires risk assessments, transparency, and compliance, especially for generative AI. So Thailand has a national AI strategy spanning years 2022 up to 2027, which guides infrastructure, talent, and legal development, supported by a forthcoming royal decree and a public sector AI framework targeting ethical use in healthcare, agriculture, and energy. So Thailand collaborates with UNESCO on AI ethics, and they also train their own civil servants for sensitive sectors. So innovation is encouraged through a board of investment licensed R&D incentives, which include their own PDPA-aligned compliance requirements. Okay, so Vietnam has strengthened data protection and AI governance in recent years. Again, they have a personal data protection decree in 2023 and a 2024 law on data, which established rules on ownership, classification, cross-border transfers, and also government access. So they too have a national AI strategy which guides R&D and also governance, supported by the Ministry Decision of 1290, which sets 9 principles for responsible AI, which is very similar to the others in the region. They have a law on digital technology industry effective 2026, which will create a comprehensive AI framework. That said, challenges remain. There are many public sector AI projects that are dormant, and initiatives face funding, infrastructure, and even workforce gaps, which is common in the region. So nevertheless, Vietnam has an ambitious aim to train all youths in AI and data science by 2030, and they plan to expand computing infrastructure, leveraging tax incentives and global partnerships to drive digital transformation. So maybe I'll take this opportunity to also say to this very young audience that you need to use AI. It's not going to be an AI versus person in the job market in the future. It's going to be a person who does not know how to use AI, and it's a person who uses AI really well. But you need to make sure that you use it properly. So I use AI on a daily basis. I use a lot of AI tools, and I'm not ashamed to say that I use it for my own research, but you need to use it properly. So you need to make sure that you make really good prompts, and to make sure that you know how to decipher when AI is telling the truth and when it is not. So just, I digress, but I just felt the need to say that. So there are a few countries in the region that need to play more catch up. So Brunei has yet to pass AI-specific laws, but they take a strategic ethical approach. So the Authority for Infocoms in the country, or the AITI, they have a guide on AI governance and ethics, which outlines 7 similar principles as the other ASEAN countries. So this includes transparency, fairness, accountability, and of course, data protection. So AI policy is embedded in the Digital Economy Master Plan of 2025, which emphasizes, similar to others, infrastructure, skills, and public-private collaboration. So they are also developing a national data strategy, while they have a personal data protection law, which is nearing finalization in the country. So Brunei's approach prioritizes human oversight, risk management, and alignment with international and ASEAN AI governance standards. Okay, so Myanmar is very early on the AI train. They have no formal AI laws yet. But since 2025, they have a Ministry of Science and Technology that is coordinating the draft of their own national AI strategy. So this emphasizes ethical AI aligned with ASEAN principles of fairness, sustainability, privacy, and transparency. So data protection has begun since 2021 with their electronic transactions law covering secure storage and prohibited misuse. And they also have a draft 2025 cybersecurity law, which is closely tied with AI, which require the larger platforms to register. So they have an e-governance master plan for 2030, which integrates AI, cloud computing, Internet of Things, and big data, focusing again on infrastructure, cyber, and digital literacy, but for Myanmar, specifically for the underserved communities. So they want to lift those communities up. Okay, so Cambodia's AI governance is emerging, but they are guided by ethical safeguards, regional cooperation, and international standards. So there are no dedicated AI laws yet, but data privacy and human oversight are priorities for them. That said, they do follow the UNESCO's Ethics of AI framework and the ASEAN Guide on AI Governance. And they do have their own digital government policy of 2022 to 2035 for a long-term roadmap. Okay. So similar to Brunei, Myanmar, and Cambodia, Lao PDR has no AI-specific laws yet, but they maintain a binding data protection framework under the 2017 law on electronic data protection and the cybercrime law, with rights for data subjects and penalties for misuse. So AI governance is being developed through their National Digital Economic Development Strategy, aligned with the ASEAN Digital Master Plan of 2025. So this includes sector-specific rules, mandatory impact assessments, and they do work closely with the UNESCO for ethics guidance. Okay, so like most of the region, Singapore governs AI primarily through their Personal Data Protection Act, PDPA, which is supported by the 2024 Personal Data Protection Commission guidance on AI, covering consent, transparency, and research exceptions. So here, organizations must document governance practices to ensure fairness, mitigate bias, and follow tools Like they have the AI Verify and the Model AI Governance Framework, and this is all open source. This is free for everyone to use. And so they updated these for generative AI. So for Singapore, they have a risk-based, innovation-friendly approach to AI governance. But right now, Singapore is already at the forefront of innovation. So it needs to have more binding regulation now. So in ASEAN, we have the soft touch, the light touch approach because we want to foster innovation. But Singapore is already there, so we need to enforce binding AI regulations to mitigate the harms of AI to society. So if Singapore does not do this, it sends a negative message to countries from outside the region that we are not taking AI governance seriously in the region. And this affects not just the country, but everyone else in ASEAN. Okay, so in conclusion, ASEAN countries are integrating data protection with AI governance, using national strategies, ethics guidance, and regional alignment to promote responsible AI. The approach is largely soft law but ethically grounded, emphasizing fairness, transparency, and accountability. And it's important for us to show the rest of the world that we take ethical AI seriously, because that's when they bring the investment, that's when trust is built for the rest of the world within our region. Okay, so that said, there could be more updates. For example, the ASEAN Digital Master Plan needs an update. And as AI grows, we need more powerful data protection laws. And this is increasingly becoming more important in the region. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Karryl. I think I have several questions because my research is aligned to your research as well, but particularly I studied an Indonesian case, the ethical approach and how it affects the interpretations from policymakers. But keep it later. After the second speaker, I thank you once again. I'd like to invite Mbak Alfatika to come forward, joining us here to deliver her research. Please, Mbak Alfatika, the floor is yours.
I have too much on my hands. So I think if you guys don't mind, can you just help me to do the next, thing for the slides. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alfatika Aunuriella Dini. You can call me Tika. Currently, I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Law. So we're neighbors. And I can see that some of my students are here. We had a chit chat earlier today. And today I'm going to be presenting about my latest study on the critical challenges and integrated solutions in the implementation of digital rupiah, or what we know as central banking digital currency in digital economic system. And I co-write it together with my co-author, who is actually joining us today online. Hi, Swarna. Swarna Jyoti. She used to be my student, but now she's working in a technology company in Singapore. All right, so next. Okay, so actually when I was asked to be one of the speakers in this panel number 2, I understand that the meaning of technological development, especially with regards to surveillance, is about artificial intelligence. But because the topic of the study of my paper is about CBDC, we will see and we will see whether AI could play some big roles in the implementation of the CBDC. So just for a background, that the Garuda project, it was introduced in 2022 and it is still going on up until now. So it's divided into 3 stages: the immediate stages, the entry stages, and then the second one is the intermediary stages, which actually has been done by the proof of concept of the digital rupiah back in 2024. And the end stages of the implementation of CBDC or digital rupiah in Indonesia, and it's actually planned to be implemented on the third stages in 2027. So we are actually still on the second stages. That's why I think this is the correct time for you guys, especially for the students, to actively engage with the government, read the consultative paper, read the white paper, and then give them direct input and insights. Right. So the background is because why this is, me and Swarna think that this is important because we believe that the government were motivated because there is a shift in transactions during the pandemic from the conventional to digital. That is firstly. And then second, there is a rise of the use of cryptocurrency. I'm saying cryptocurrency because back in 2022, crypto is not deemed as an asset. Right now, we have the UU P2SK, the law on, law number 4 of 2023 on the development and strengthening the financial sector. From now on, I will say just P2SK law because it's too long of a title. And before that law, before the enactment of that law, crypto is in a gray area up until 2023. So people use that for, currency exchange, people use that for an asset, and so on and so forth. I think the government, through the Central Bank of Indonesia, they wanted to create something as a competitor of the cryptocurrency back in 2022. So the CBDC goal, according to the Bank Indonesia, or the Central Bank of Indonesia, is 3. The first one is to serve as the legal digital payment within the Republic of Indonesia, of course. Second is to act as a key tool, enabling Bank Indonesia to execute its operation in the digital age. And third one, this is actually very interesting and very relevant with the panel too, which is to enhance financial inclusion. And financial inclusion, especially in the context of enhancement using CBDC, is actually a double-edged sword in Indonesia. We know there are a lot of areas, remote areas in Indonesia that haven't been even touched with the internet services. But it's more than that in Indonesia. I think this week, I'm actually very saddened with the news of Raya, a toddler, 4 years old. She passed away due to a worm infestation and cannot be helped with the government insurance, BPJS, because she didn't have KTP or national ID. So the root of the cause is we no longer talk about no internet connection in Indonesia, but as simple as no national ID, and that happens in Indonesia. So we will talk about that, about the financial inclusion later on, and the complexities of implementing the digital rupiah in throughout Indonesia. Right, and then in 2023, of course, I've mentioned that when the project is still ongoing, CBDC is anticipated to counter the unchecked proliferations of the cryptocurrency at that time. And the government hopes that these CBDC things, because they already initiated, that could increase the effectiveness of economic policy and to erode the shadow economy created by the cryptocurrency. And then after the enactment of the P2SK law, the revised interpretation of Article 2, Paragraph 2 of the currency law, it mentioned that digital rupiah is defined as digital form of rupiah issued by Bank Indonesia and constitute as a monetary obligation of BI, so direct obligation of BI. The usual money that we have obligations to, the bank, the conventional bank has obligation to us. But this is, we have a direct relations, that direct, what is it called, like legal relationship with Bank Indonesia, the Central Bank of Indonesia, in which before CBDC, it is impossible to have that kind of relationship. However, based on the literature review as well, there are a lot of identified challenges on the implementation of CBDC in other contexts and in other countries. In my paper, I reviewed about the implementation of CBDC in Sweden, and then in China, and also in Canada. You will see that they have similarities of challenges, and the most prominent one is the challenge on consumer protection, including privacy and also data security. And therefore, we think that there is a necessity for CBDC regulations to carefully balance personal privacy and data protection against the requirement of state oversight. I think there's always a debate between privacy versus utility, right? Because there's always a trade-off. If you want to prioritize utility, then of course privacy will be eroded, and the other way around. And I believe that not each and every one of you is concerned about privacy, right? Even more now because, you know, we have smartphone and we see a lot of memes, a lot of reels, you know, when your boyfriend or girlfriend are away from the phone, you can instill some of the idea, like, you know, Bali vacations, Thailand vacations to the phone, and then they will listen, and then they will give you suggestion, right? So it's called customization. So privacy versus customization has been a debate since a long time ago, even before we have this PDP law. Okay, that's why, and that leads us to the objective of the research. Next. Yeah, so the objective is, of course, to identify the key challenges in implementing the digital rupiah in Indonesia and propose potential solutions. And a little bit disclaimer, because this project is still going on, the digital rupiah, not the paper. The paper, of course, can be expanded, but the digital rupiah itself, this is a project and still going on until now. So I guess what I will identify and also what I will propose is still, you know, tentative in this sense, right? Next. And by using grounded theory, where we let the data speak for itself, of course, we categorize on the emerging topic from the data that includes these 5 frameworks. Sorry, it's not here, I'll just mention it. The first one is the regulatory and policy framework, technological infrastructure, public acceptance, and interoperability with existing systems. So I will discuss that one by one, briefly per topic. The first identified challenge is about digital regulation, policies, and legal issues. And digital rupiah could collect sensitive payment and user data on an unprecedented scale, and potentially giving the central bank extensive power to monitor and influence the individual finances. I think some weeks ago, we also see a lot of memes circulating on the internet saying that now Bank Indonesia can monitor your financial transaction. You know, now today you bought a tahu bulat and then Bank Indonesia will notice. Today you did a transaction with the ATM and there is nothing to withdraw, and Bank Indonesia will know that. So those kind of things is real, is happening right now. And that can be, how to say it, accommodated into the implementation of CBDC. Because CBDC, the name is a central bank digital currency, but you can also use it offline. So that's why they say that one of the goals to implement CBDC is to enhance inclusions, because it can be used online and offline as well. But then again, our problem is much bigger than internet connection. We still have some of the citizens of Indonesia who, you know, do not have any national ID, right? And this is the first one, the first point here. This is evident within the P2SK law regarding the management and implementation of the digital rupiah. And the amended currency law specifies in Article 14, mentioning that Bank Indonesia is the sole institutions authorized to manage it, the digital rupiah, with further details to be governed by Bank Indonesia regulations. I would like you to focus on the statement of the sole institutions, meaning Bank Indonesia is the only institutions that has the authority to manage CBDC or digital rupiah. And I think the powerful capacity of BI or Bank Indonesia mandated by the law as mentioned, this is very powerful. Why? Because they need the authority to detect money laundering, fraud, and then also other type of unlawful action through CBDC implementation. But also, on the other hand, it can endanger privacy or security if misused for fiscal policy agenda, for instance. And Article 50, Paragraph 1 of the PDP law, the Personal Data and Protection Law, exempts certain data control obligation in the financial sector of the state administration purposes. I think this is the same with Dr. Karryl mentioned about Malaysia and also Cambodia. The PDP law, the data protection law, exempts some of the obligations to the government institutions in this sense. And I think with the big and also powerful authority of all the CBDC, if misused, adik-adik, biar seumuran ya. If misused, I think such sensitive data and authority could be used to spy on private transaction, as we discussed before, and then also gather security sensitive information about individuals, organizations, or entities, and gather security sensitive information about what is it called? Like identity, personal identity of the people who are the user of CBDC, and so also this could be facilitating unlawful action. Right? So we need to know and we need transparency and also a certain indicator who has the access to our data under the Central Bank of Indonesia with regards to CBDC. And I think technical safeguards, including as privacy enhancing technology or PET, the Central Bank of Indonesia has already implemented that within the architectural design of the CBDC itself. However, I think they cannot replace the effective governance, the effective democratic governance of the CBDC. So we need, beside the architectural and also the infrastructure of the CBDC, we need to know the flow of how they supervise and oversee the CBDC implementation. And the design and deployment of the digital rupiah include basic policy considerations such as what data will be collected, who will have access to it, and when. And all of it represent Indonesia's societal values and also public goals towards CBDC. In my paper, you can also see and review and read, of course read, the differences between the government, between China, Sweden, and also Canada, how they apply the tiering system of who has access to the data within the CBDC implementation. And from the international context, we have learned that actually the government approach to CBDC implementations are differences. In China, they have different motivation with why Sweden applying CBDC, for instance. Both are successful, the implementation of CBDC in China and in Sweden, but they have different underlying approach and also motivation. The first one, Sweden's policy is founded on robust democratic institutions that prioritize transparency, accountability, and also public participation. And the implementation of CBDC, for your information, is because there is a steep decline in cash utilization even before COVID-19. So starting in 2017, there are only 6% of the population in Sweden that still use cash. The rest of the Sweden citizens, they are already cashless society. So I can say that Sweden is CBDC ready country in that sense, different like Indonesia. And China, they aim to implement CBDC to control digital money and simultaneously to implement government surveillance on the people. So they have different approach and motivation. And I think the key takeaways from these two countries is that Indonesia, we need to increase the democratic oversight towards the CBDC implementation. And I think mindful participation from the civil society, especially from the students, is now. Now is the time for you to read the consultative paper and also the white paper of the Project Garuda. And I would like to ask, how many of you have read the Project Garuda white paper? The consultative paper? Okay, you couldn't care less, right? Because it doesn't have any effect to me now, that's correct. But probably in 2027, there will be, piloting of CBDC implementation in some cities. So I think you should be prepared for that. And please read the consultative paper and also the white paper of the Garuda project. And I think the effort by the government, Bank Indonesia, to do some kind of socialization to the public and then to the society is very crux in this sense. Because I think such initiative will enable the digital rupiah to promote innovation, inclusion, and also democratic and human rights. Next. Right. The second one for the identified challenge is about technology infrastructure. From the paper, the architectural design mentioned that digital rupiah utilizes a hybrid technology platform integrating both a DLT, distributed ledger technology, and a centralized infrastructure. And they use some kind of what is called as a permission DLT here. The permission-based DLT, meaning it has a specific rules and processes that determine which nodes or parties are authorized to read the entire ledger, add new data, and validate entries. I think this is where AI or artificial intelligence can play some roles. Why? Because they are very objective. Unlike us, human, we are very subjective and very prone to, the misuse of technology. But when the AI plays some rules, we need to put some boundaries and indicator, like to what extent they can have authorization to validate entries, to change the data, and so on and so forth. And this technology is not invulnerable, meaning it is vulnerable to cyber attacks. And I think Bank Indonesia must select trusted parties and monitor verified transactions to mitigate this risk. And who else? Rather than the rising star of AI. But then again, we have privacy versus utility debate on that. Yeah, there's always a trade-off. Next. And also the other identified challenge is the public acceptance. The first one, I think you will agree with me, that there is a trust issue with our government. It's moreover right now, but before, we already have trust issues since the COVID, the new normal they mentioned, right? And for this, for the first point, I think educating the public about digital rupiah is crucial. We need to know what is digital rupiah, what is not a digital rupiah, what are the pros and what are the cons, right? Especially since people of Indonesia, they're very used to using electronic money, credit card, debit card, ATM, and other type of payment, right? So what does it have, any difference with digital rupiah? What is the added value of digital rupiah? You can read it in my paper because I make a comparison between e-money and also digital rupiah and also the conventional money. And because, for instance, the one thing that actually will be a potential problem in the future is that CBDC will require a digital identity or digital ID from each and every user of CBDC. And I think this digital identity may discriminate against particular group of people. We do not talk about people with no internet access. We do not talk about people with disability. We do not talk about people with, senior age. But we talk about people with no ID. That's the problem in Indonesia. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to, try to map who are people who doesn't have the national ID before they can convert into a CBD user? I think that's AI can play some roles in this as well. Next. The fourth one is the interstate interoperability issues. I actually, learned a lot about the indicator by the bank for international settlement, or the BIS. They mentioned that these four areas or these four topics are the identified issues with regards to interoperability. The first one, of course, the investment and maintenance costs, because implementing a system on a uniform platform requires a full setup and is likely to be the most expensive solution. That is first one. That is the first CBDC problem with regard to interstate or cross-jurisdiction or cross-border interoperability issues. And then the second one is the scalability, because achieving broad scalability requires countries to adopt uniform standard. This is going back to the first problem. And then legal framework and regulation. We know that time is up, okay. Let me finish up for 2 more minutes, okay? So legal framework, because law is a system. We know that tax laws, payment, data sharing, and privacy protection differ per country, and this is creating legal uncertainty. So we know that the Central Bank of Indonesia, we try to cooperate with the neighboring country that has the same characteristic and also same legal framework like Japan and also Thailand and so on and so forth. Next. Okay, I'm just gonna wrap this up. You can read it by yourself, okay, in the paper. These are the solutions. So I create the problem, but also I provide the solution, okay? So you can read it. And then next, this is my final slide. So how can AI use for CBDC, right? There are three main points. The first one is AI, of course, can boost fraud detection, optimize consensus method for improved scalability, and also personalize user support to promote adoption. And then the second one, Bank Indonesia must ensure that the design of CBDC is crafted meticulously to safeguard public privacy and protect against cyber threat. With the use of AI-driven data mining tools. But remember, we need to put some boundaries in to what extent AI can mine the data and access the data, and for what. So, and the last one, this is actually very relevant with Indonesian context right now. CBDC piloting in different cities is a must for the implementation. And massive CBDC socialization with the use of AI. Why? Because it's fun. That is the first thing that we think about AI. You can, inquire a question like, how can CBDC use my data? Can CBDC understand or see my financial transaction and so on and so forth? Is it safe? And so on and so forth. So you can ask that, and I think the Central Bank of Indonesia could adopt like a chatbot in their website in accordance with the CBDC socialization. All right, I think that's it, and I think we're ready to discuss about the CBDC. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mbak Tika. I think you can stay here, and also I'll invite Dr. Karryl to also joining us here in front. I'll open up for question and answer sessions. Anyone online and offline? I believe online there is none. So I'll move to offline audience if there's any. I got one there. Any raise hands to probably maximum 3, anyone? Another one? Yeah, 3. Okay, silakan. Please stand up, yeah. Name and introduce yourself. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Amelinda and I'm from SafeNet. I have one question, particularly for the first speaker. That was such an interesting research to map out how the laws has been enacted when it comes to AI. But I do wonder though, I understand that soft laws is more favorable to prevent stifling innovation, but at the same time, soft law also have compliance issues, right? And it's based on the willingness of the governance party to voluntarily adhere to the regulation. And that makes me wonder, when we are talking about Southeast Asian region, where a lot of countries are dealing with corruption and collusion, how do we prevent that instead of, well, let's see in the US, there are so many cases in which soft laws has allow the bigger players to dictate how the regulation should be. And I was wondering, how about in Southeast Asia country, like in Indonesia, how to prevent that only big player can dictate how the regulation should be made? Should we try to balance the soft and hard laws, or what do you reckon on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we just pile up to the second and the third questions and then leave 2 answers.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, magandang tanghali. Dr. Karryl, I have one question for you, and it's sort of related to the question of the first questioner, which is that considering that soft laws are very vulnerable to compliance issues, as the first questioner has said, I'd like to add that ASEAN as a whole has had like a very widespread issue with compliance in general, not just in technology, but even in diplomacy, as we have seen, like in the recent case, which is that ASEAN was also supposed to be a sort of security union, not just an economic union. But we have seen that member states are still somehow able to war with each other. Should then ASEAN pivot to a more hard law like EU-style supranational union, so that we could ensure compliance and cooperation between its member states. That's all.
My name is Naning. I'm from Magister Anthropology. My question is, pardon my broken English. What if the one who mining our data is the government itself? And because I have so many trust issue to our government, and actually, what if the one who stole our data is the government? What can we do as an active to protect ourselves, our privacy, and like that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak. I believe the last question should be directly addressed by Mbak Tika ya, karena tadi bahas, because we discussed about privacy and data protection and ways the government could step up forward. Okay, without further ado, I think I'll leave the first two questions to Karryl.
Hi, yes, thank you for your questions. I think I can answer both in one go. So I think sweeping laws across ASEAN will be trickier than the EU, because even though we look the same, I mean, I go to Jogja City Mall, they'd speak to me in Bahasa. We have very different cultures, religions, economic development, tech development, and AI development. It's not a one-to-one comparison with the EU, where even their languages are, they all speak 5 languages to talk to everybody. Their tech development is very close, even for small states such as Estonia. So here it's going to be very hard. And again, the power that ASEAN has on the region is not as strong as what the EU has for the rest of Europe. So I think we must rely on, firstly, national level norms. So we need a country by country strong AI governance. I think the time is really ripe for Singapore. And maybe touching on question 3 as well, it needs to be AI governance from a multi-stakeholder perspective. It's not just from the government, it's not just from industry, it's not just from academia, but we also need civil society. So I believe in some countries, I've seen Singapore, I've seen Malaysia, I'm not sure for Indonesia, but they do have calls for public participation in terms of you can comment on upcoming AI laws. So we must leverage on those things. We can, I mean, just one person is not enough to do something, but collectively, student organizations, academics, there is a lot of opportunity there to address these issues. And I mean, I share your, I share that because I'm originally from the Philippines. And governance is not as good as Singapore. So in Singapore, they do trust the government. We ran a survey on who Singaporeans trust the most to regulate AI, and it's the government. And I think in any other Southeast Asian country, that's likely not going to be the case. So it's really very different. Yeah, so.
Okay. So thank you so much. And yes, it's the government. I don't know. This is live, right? So I need to, censor some of my words. But thank you so much for the questions. And I would like to, give you some not just some, like just one or two enlightenment on this, because since we have the PDB law in 2022, so each entity, including organization and government, if they want to get and access and process your private data or your data, they need to have a written or recorded consent. So what I always tell my students as well as my friends is that we need to be aware of it. We need to educate ourselves with regards to data mining by the government or by other entities. Usually this has been done many times, and I believe some of you are already aware that they mine our data through the apps, through the websites and so on and so forth. And what you have to remember is that we have this PDP law on Article 10 and 50, especially on Article 10, they mention that the personal data subject has the rights to object on the decision-making processes in which it's solely processed automatically without any human intervention. Okay, and that including profiling that has legal consequences or has deterrent effect on the personal data subject. However, there is an exemption for that, and one of which is including for the purpose of government implementations and administrations. So everybody could, subject to that article except the government. So I think we need to not criticize, we need to give them some inputs in this public hearing session before the law or the bill is passed. And I heard that the regulation, the draft regulation on artificial intelligence will be headed over to the legislative this August. So we'll just wait and see. I think that's a bold move from Indonesian government because up until now, we, as you mentioned, Doctor, we only have the soft law to regulate artificial intelligence, and it is, of course, it is not binding. So the compliance is, it's really up to the entity or the organizations or industry who would like to comply or not. So hopefully there is a what is it called? Like a light at the end of the tunnel, secercah harapan. But for the draft, we don't know whether it will be passed anytime soon or not. So that's, thank you so much. So just let us educate ourselves and remind ourselves that whenever they need our data and control our data or mine our data, we need to give them written or recorded consent. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the wonderful answers. I think we have several minutes for the second roundup of questions. Is there anyone who want to raise questions or concerns or their thoughts on the presentations? If not, then I'll be the one who asks. So actually, it can be answered by both speakers. But regarding ethical principles of artificial intelligence, so last year, if not 2 years ago, the center was invited at the ASEAN HQ just to give their thoughts on the DEFA, Digital Economy Framework Agreement. And throughout the sessions, I immersed myself to a very private sector-led discussions for AI discussions, particularly on the AI ethical principles of ASEAN. To that context, that leads to Singapore government being the leader for the ASEAN AI discussions throughout the sessions of the discussions. My question would be how, and especially because ASEAN discursive debates are based on consensus and not specifically tied up into specific political power or power relations between each country. How do you find ASEAN ethical principles have sort of like a very ground up, rooted discussions that cover all member states' contexts, given the fact that the discussion itself is a very top-down and private sector-led discussions? That would be the first one, and I believe the second one would go to Mbak Tika regarding even our derivative regulations on PDP has not there yet. what do you think it would look like in terms of central bank digital currency? Because they can't enact solely just through Bank Indonesia regulations, if I'm not mistaken. What's your thoughts on that derivative regulations in existence? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so it's gonna be tricky, but I think the first step would be to advocate for ourselves as a region. So Singapore has introduced, I think this was late 2023, it's called Sea Lion, Southeast Asian Languages in One Network. So it's actually a Southeast Asian LLM, large language model, that is trained on Southeast Asian data. Government laws, academic papers by Thai, Indonesian, Philippine, Singaporean, trained in Bahasa, Tagalog, Thai language, Southeast Asia. So that sets a good precedent. And then we show the rest of the world that we have our own capacity for building Southeast Asian LLM. And it's actually a good thing also because it's more contextual. So for example, this is way back, like early ChatGPT. If you ask a Western LLM by OpenAI, what do you think of Singapore? They say it's a draconian country, that it's very scary there, you're gonna die there if you do this and that. There's some truth to that, but mostly they're very biased and very out of context stuff. So that was the intention of creating our own Southeast Asian LLM. So there's Sea Lion. And you mentioned about ethics, right? So I think there are, in terms of ethics, and I'm not an ethicist, but my take here is that there are certainly some gray areas. For example, Prabowo using a cuddly AI grandpa figure to make his image more approachable, I think that's a gray area. That's, in some places, that's going to be okay. But using AI to resuscitate late President Suharto to endorse Golkar candidates, that definitely crosses the line. So we do have differences, but I think we can be more in agreement on where we really have to draw the line.
Thank you, doctor. It's very interesting. I need to look up on the internet on the resuscitation of President Suharto to support other candidates. All right. So thank you, Mas Hafid, for the question with regard to the derivative regulation. I think it is still needed. The basis framework, legal framework for the CBDC implementation right now, we're relying on two undang-undang to act. The first one is the law number 4 on 2023. This is the omnibus law in the financial sector because it has amended the currency law that give the legal basis that digital rupiah is a legal tender in Indonesia. And then secondly, because law is a system, so it is intertwined and interlinked with the other regulations, is the personal data protection law number 2 of 2022. So we rely on those two, and the derivative regulation with regards to digital rupiah, we only have the Bank Indonesia regulation, PBI, on consumer protection, as well as the latest one, number 4 of 2025, on the, what is it called? The payment system policy, which is the basis of CBDC implementation. I think we need not more regulation, but we need to be strategic in seeing whether we still need more derivative regulation, not directly under the omnibus law of the financial sector, but we want to see the other derivative regulation from other act, like the PDP. Up until now, as you mentioned, we haven't had any derivative regulations. The role of a data protection officer is not yet being activated right now. Probably they have some roles on the implementation of CBDC as the officer who can, give authorizations to the AI if there is a possibility for the AI to be implemented within the CBDC, to give the authority and also to what extent AI can access the data and so on and so so forth. So we actually need the prompter because, as you mentioned, the prompter is much more important than the AI itself. So we need actually the most urgent derivative regulation is the what is it called? The regulations for the implementing regulation for the data protection law with regards to protecting the privacy and personal data. I think that's it, Mas Hafiz. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that closes our first discussion in panel 2. Big round of applause to our 2 speakers here. Moving on to the next session, I'll invite Dr. Surachanee Sriyai of ISEAS-Yushof Ishak Institute to deliver her research.
All right, thank you. Can you help me? Yeah. All right, good afternoon. I think listening from the room, I can already see that you guys have a lot of trust issue to your government. So I'm not sure if my lecture will help you with that, probably make it worse. But yeah, so my name is Hammerly and I'm the visiting fellow at ISEAS-Yushof Ishak Institute Media Technology and Society program. So I will kind of take a little bit of a spin-off in this session a little bit. I will not be talking about AI specifically, but more of it as a subset of emerging technology, right, and how that can contribute to the development nexus in Southeast Asia. I will draw some of the examples from Thailand and Myanmar, which are the area that I frequently follow and study. Right. So, next slide, please. Digital technologies, of course, as you guys know, have been reshaping our development sphere, right? Digital technologies, particularly like I mentioned, AI and Gen AI, are reshaping our global development, and they promise many, many things, right? Sorry, the font is probably a little too small. But they promise the world that should be, or society that should be more inclusive, more efficient, governance that are more efficient, and also through optimization of social protection to enhance smart infrastructure, etc. However, of course, there's also an increase in reliance on data, which are often extracted without full understanding or consent of the citizen. And that also raised profound ethical and legal questions from broad range of privacy issues, surveillance, and power relation type of issue as well. So this paper that I wrote, I wanted to explore how digital development can responsibly harness emerging technologies while safeguarding fundamental rights such as privacy and things like that, and drawing on the concept of surveillance capitalism frameworks in Southeast Asian experience. Are you guys familiar with the concept of surveillance capitalism? Have you read the book from Zuboff's? Yeah, it's quite an interesting book if you guys have a chance to take a look at it. Next slide. Yes. But actually the concept of surveillance capitalism stems from the critiques of tech company, right, and corporations that have the tendency to extract personal data for profit. Looking at you, Facebook. Not so much Google, it's a sponsor of the event. But you guys, we just had that discussion, right, that sometimes this type of data collection become unbeknownst to the user a lot of time, right? When was the last time you actually read the fine print or the disclaimer when you click agree or to any terms and conditions, right? But anyway, I digress. But surveillance capitalism can also be applied to the concept in state-led developmental programs as well. That includes the dynamics of data capture, asymmetrical power, and the lack of transparency in development. So in Southeast Asia, governments and their development partners increasingly deploy AI and big data tools under the banner of quote-unquote national progress, right? Digital transformation or even efficient service delivery. They usually collect really granulated data of the citizen, be it the biometric IDs, right, health records, or mobility pattern, right, where it's, when it comes to employment type of data. And this provides, or this kind of stems a lot of risks that could come with it, right? It could reproduce structural asymmetries, treating individuals as passive, just a subject, right? Data subject, data sources. And it's quite interesting because crucially, the power dynamic in the state-led data extraction through surveillance capitalism concept is quite different than what the company can do, right? The state-led data extractions differs from corporate surveillance in that the state can exercise coercive authority over its population, and that renders the surveillance development nexus even more consequential. Right. While private firms, a lot of time, may be restrained by market pressure or even people's pressure. Right? If you use the product and then you realize that they are infringing on your privacy rights, you can start boycotting or banning the product, and then usually, the company would back down a little bit. But that's usually not the case when it comes to state developmental program. That leads to what I'd like to call surveillance developmentalism, which refer to state capacities to expand its digital power and footprint without much of the civil liberties safeguards. And so there are a couple of things, like I've mentioned before, that there are promises, but also, of course, the AI development and emerging technology and development can also be the double-edged sword too, right? So promises, right? Emerging tech, of course, enables effective or more effective governance, be it the health analytics or digital ID that has been proven useful, right, to promote efficiency, reduces leakage, and also allow for more personalized public services. For example, machine learning models are being used to map out poverty hotspots, while satellite imagery is also used to develop GIS program that forecasts agricultural yields for climate vulnerable communities in many developing countries, including Thailand and India, for example. Agentic AI and also predictive AI tools have also been introduced in many countries to streamline data processing and minimizing human errors in multiple sectors, including healthcare and defense. But there are the downside of it, of course, and our previous speakers have also mentioned some of it already. The massive data collection and biometric data that are being collected with limited oversight. Right, when it comes to what the government are doing, and sometimes the data are being repurposed for profit or political control. You guys heard of the case of Cambridge Analytica? Yeah, that's right. So that's also one of the example, more westernized example, but also this type of cases have also been happening in the Southeast Asia during the election time as well. The data segmentation and voter segmentation and personalization or targeting, things like that has also, of course, been widely known that it's happening, right? And that also can also be partially attributed to public-private collusion between the state and the tech companies as well. But overall, also, we need to take note that the internet freedoms in Southeast Asia have also been declining despite our infrastructure growth. Right? So many countries in Southeast Asia have made significant progress in developing their digital infrastructure. You have more people connected to internet. decades ago, right? From now compared to decades ago, better implementation of e-government services. The regions, actually, the region's e-government developing index, EDGI, that's being measured by the UN in 2022 is higher than the world average, surprisingly, right? But according to my other study that I followed, that I covered digital repression trend in Southeast Asia, there's an increase in, well, I should say, decline in internet freedom because of the increased surveillance and censorship in Southeast Asia. This increase is particularly notable in the capacity of state to control digital infrastructure through different methods, such as internet filtering, internet shutdown, and also social media monitoring capability. Interestingly, there's no discernible divide in this type of capacity between high-income and low-income countries. Just to give you an example, Myanmar is the poorest ASEAN country, right? But it has a similar internet filtering and shutdown capabilities to Singapore, the richest country in Southeast Asia. Right. So just a small, quick self-PR. It's you can look it up. You can look this report up, digital repression, and then in Southeast Asia, you can look up my name, and it's there. All right, next slide. So we also need to talk about the privacy risks and legal policy gap, right, when it comes to development programs that states are implementing, right? Of course, the proliferation of emerging technology, particularly the AI tools in development, most of the time outpaces the legal safeguards, right? Policy making generally tends to trail behind the development of technologies. And I think a lot that seems to be a recurring trend that we're hearing from different speakers all day today, right? Southeast Asian countries also tends to leverage their advanced digital capabilities for both development and control, right? Two things go at the same time, right? By 2021, 75% of countries in the world, right, had some sort of data protection law. Dr. Karryl talked about the PDPA law. That's one of the example. Frameworks like the EU General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, can usually be used as a baseline reference for a global standard. But however, many low and middle income countries tend to lack the robust data protection laws, institutional capacity, or leverage to even enforce them to begin with, right? So this legal vacuum then creates the space for excessive data collection and abuse of data. And that the fragmented policy at national level also not making the case any better, because then therefore the citizens tends to lack the redress mechanism or mitigation mechanism to go up against the state or the government. I take you to Thailand as one of the key example of the AI adoption, but also the dilemma of data protection. So the case in point here is, as Thailand is trying to embrace artificial intelligence with great enthusiasm for a lot of reasons, for economic reason, for competitiveness reason, for better good governance reason. We tend to fall behind when it comes to adopting governance framework on AI, right? And we also have PDPA law as one of the other leg or other branch of data protection, but there seems to be also another weak spot in PDPA law as well. Just to give you an example, from the survey that was done by the Ministry of Digital Economy and Society, they did it themselves, they did an auditing report. They found over 6,000 breaches in 31,000, I can't even do math right now, state units, so state agencies, right? So over 31,000 state agencies, there have been over 6,000 breaches in data breaches. When I say breaches, it's data breaches in just 1 year. 2023, 2024, just 1 year, 6,000 cases. And those leaks have exposed over 20 million Thais personal data, right? Be it our social security number, national ID numbers, our health, and all that, right? It has been leaked and have been used and sold in. Some have been sold in the dark market as well, right? And also, apart from that 6,000 case of breaches, they also found 139 cases of those breach came from the government officials stealing our data and sold our data, right? All of that, you see that this is already bad enough, right? There's no accountability reported. Nobody so far have been arrested because of this at all. So what's the point of having data protection law if it's not going to be implemented, right? In my memory, I think there's only one case that the PDPA law have been implemented and have been used to persecute it, actually private firm that let the data of their customer leaked out, right? So, I mean, already we also see disparity in terms of law, the application of law when it comes to when the wrongdoer is the state agency versus when it's a private firm. True. Right? That's kind of like the example of, the failure of data protection law in Thailand. And at the same time, we also have National AI Action Plan all the way through 2030. And of course, this also falls behind when it comes to Gen AI governance. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I also want to take you to another country, which is Myanmar. If you ever have any doubts that whether states are, monitoring you and survey you and try to get your data for other stuff, to suppress your freedom of rights, Myanmar is the place. All right. So Myanmar is, of course, without a doubt, without any string of a doubt, right? Myanmar uses development as a cover for surveillance, and I say that out loud. Right. In September 2024, the Ministry of Transport and Communication of Myanmar announced the completion of digitalization and registration of their citizens, 52 million people, using the EID biometric registration software technology, in the name that they cite that they would like to form a national database of the people. And this public declaration of a national database can be framed, of course, as a step forward towards digital development and efficient data management, especially when combined. Before that, in 2016, they have also put out a requirement on mandatory SIM card registration that they started off, and then combine that with other type of biometric data collection. You're supposed to have the digitalized ID card for travel and passport and things like that too. So the EID project also gained even more traction in 2023. That was a year after the SAC, the State Administration Council state coup in Myanmar. Right, and then so they announced the plan for biometrics data collection all around Naypyidaw. Right, so that's one example. But in combination of EID registration, Myanmar also have Smart City Initiative. You guys have Smart City Initiative? We also have that in Thailand too. But yeah, this is also quite interesting because there's a report that came out that for Myanmar, I mean, it's also probably also similar to other countries as well. They install more and more CCTV around every corner, right? But the reports came for just specifically for Myanmar that this technology have been expanded with support of the Chinese government. You know how that go, right? And they integrated this smart city initiative with the technology like PSMS, which is the person scrutiny and monitoring system. Basically, the EID plus PSMS allowed the SAC or the Burmese government to enable blanket surveillance and allowing for monitoring and tracking of targeted individuals. Usually it's the CDMs, it's the people who were involved in the civil disobedience movement, the political activists, or the politicians that went up against the SAC, right? And apart all this, right? I know about this. That organization that wrote the report know about this. I'm sure ASEAN knows about it. But there's nothing, right? ASEAN response on this type of, blatant infringement of individuals' rights have been, non-existent really due to the non-interference principle. So I'll skip this part. It's already the next slide. I'll skip, but I will wrap up with my recommendation for the ethical digital governance, right? Of course, there's in pursuit of inclusive data development, we must not trade rights for convenience and efficiency. We should mandate privacy by design in public digital system. That also includes minimizing collection of data and also build consent. People need to know what data that have been collected about them. We should invest in community-based digital literacy program. Right. I'm a big fan of that because I think digital literacy is really important, and we should also prioritize vulnerable groups, right? Including and digital literacy also must include online safety and also knowing your online rights and data protection, right? We need to also create transparent participatory governance framework. I think both of our speakers have mentioned that already. And lastly, we need to strengthen the national cybersecurity safeguard. But this seemed to be a little bit a slippery slope there because Myanmar, again, had just enacted their cybersecurity law, but it was clear that it was going to be used for bad purposes, right? Regional corporations like ASEAN Framework can also be used and empowered in a way to create some sort of meaningful recommendations that to be considered as a guideline for AMS for their digital development agenda. So I'll stop there first. Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
Great. Thank you very much, Surachanee Sriyai of ISEAS-Yushof Ishak Institute. Before we proceed to the Q&A session, I'd like to invite our last speaker, Alia Yofira of PurpleCode Collective, to deliver her research on algorithmic bureaucrats. The floor is yours.
Check, okay. Selamat siang semuanya, good afternoon, shalom nama budaya, salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Thank you so much for coming. Sessions after lunch is always challenging. I hope you can still bear with me and feel free to keep snacking throughout the presentations. Thank you also for those joining online. Okay, so I'm Alia Yofira. I'm a researcher from PurpleCode Collective. I'm also associate researcher at Saver Internet Lab, and for this presentation, I will present my paper on navigating regulatory challenges of generative AI in Indonesia's public sectors. So it aims to answer the research questions on what policy frameworks are necessary to ensure the responsible use of AI, particularly generative AI, in Indonesia's public sector. Next, a little bit about PurpleCode Collective. We are a collective that works on the intersection of issues of feminism, human rights, and technology. We are on social media there, and we have many events for youth as well. So if you want to give us a follow, please feel free to visit or send us an email to stay connected. Next. So we work on various issues, and AI is part of our emerging technologies cluster issues. And yeah, I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Next. So I think first thing first, it is important for all of us to get on the same page on what generative AI is. Next. So in its definition, generative AI refers to a class of AI systems capable of generating high-quality text, images, and other content based on the data they were trained on. Next. So as we can see from the chart, generative AI is situated within the broader landscape of AI systems. It falls under the umbrella of machine learning, which is a subset of AI system distinguished by its capability to autonomously learn and enhance performance through the analysis of extensive data sets, all without explicit programming. And within that machine learning subset, generative AI frequently employs a technique known as deep learning. So this is an advanced subset of machine learning that uses multi-layered so-called neural networks named after our brain functions to uncover intricate patterns and correlations within the data sets. So there are different types of neural network architectures that are implemented in generative AI system depending on the content modality. For example, for generative AI used in text generation context, like ChatGPT, for example, this type of generative AI models typically rely on a class of neural networks known as general purpose transformers. So this is like the big models that typically use large language models or LLMs. While the audio-visual generation, the type of generative AI that generates audio-visual contents like text, videos, typically use generative adversarial networks or called GANs, sometimes in combination with variational autoencoders. And this paper will focus more on the text generation models, so how generative AI is being used to generate text, particularly in chatbots by the governments of Indonesia. Next. So these are the key characteristics of generative AI that we need to keep in mind, because this will help us a lot in analyzing what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and what are the consequences of regulatory framework failing to catch up with this type of technology development. So first thing first, generative AI is characteristic, one of the characteristics is that it's trained on a large and complex data sets. That's either from first, publicly available information, or second, repurposed consumer data or user data. And secondly, generative AI tends to employ what known as semi-supervised learning methodology. So generative AI has various learning methodology. There are supervised one and there are unsupervised one, but generative AI commonly use a methodology called semi-supervised. which means that it combines a small amount of labeled data with a larger corpus of unlabeled data. And unlike traditional AI technologies, which primarily curate, aggregate existing digital content, generative AI creates new content from natural language prompts. And this is commonly implemented as chatbots, which simulate conversational exchanges with human users over digital platforms. Next. So the next part, we will deep dive into what are the current existing applications, specifically in Indonesia's public sector. So chatbots and generative AI being used by Indonesian government. We will focus on two sectors. The first sector is next, the health sector. Some of you might have heard about Satu Sehat. This is actually a spin-off of our COVID contact tracing app, Peduli Lindungi. So very recently in 2024, Kemenkes, our Ministry of Health, together with Google Cloud, launched a generative AI sandbox initiative within Indonesia's Satu Sehat digital health ecosystem. So the idea is to incorporate AI-driven chatbot to provide preliminary self-assessment and pre-diagnosis for Indonesian citizens prior to visiting a doctor. And I'd like to highlight a topic central to this panel, which is surveillance and privacy, particularly on the unclear data protection measures that poses significant questions regarding user data anonymity, developer access rights, data storage, and retention duration. So there is no publicly available information of a privacy policy safeguarding the conduct of this generative AI sandbox. And why is this concerning? We can learn from the past experience, that is the Peduli Lindungi app, the predecessor of this very application, which is Indonesia's contact tracing app. So during the pandemic, the Peduli Lindungi app operated without privacy policy initially, and it collects so much data, and it's very heavy on the phone because it collects location data real time and send it to several parties. The problem arises where a technical research conducted by Citizen Lab of University of Toronto, which conducts a technical examination of the app, they exposed that Peduli Lindungi shared user data without their consent to a state-owned telco company that was initially developing the applications. The data shared to the state-owned telco company is not necessary for any processing with their capacity as a developer of the app. So this raises concerns about whether or not this company used the data to, let's say, target advertising or whatever reasons that serves their commercial interest. So for this very reason, we have to always critical in terms of seeing the involvement of private companies, particularly big tech, when they are involved in the context of AI in the public sector. And as we can already see, and has been previously pointed by Hamerly in the previous presentation, that we can see there is a nexus between surveillance capitalism and state-led digital development. And this clearly illustrates that very point that was explained by Hamerly earlier. And I also recommend to read the book by Susanna Zuboff. It's really interesting. And next, the second sector is the migrant workers sectors. So very recently, this April 2025, the Foreign Ministry, together with UN Women, launched this chatbot initiatives named SARI. So SARI provides accessible support outside traditional embassy or hotline services, catering to different time zones and legal jurisdictions. And this is because we Indonesians, especially the Indonesian female migrant workers, face various abuses when they're working abroad. Data from the National Commission on Violence Against Women, or Komnas Perempuan, shows that most of the abuses are in the form of psychological violence, economic violence, sexual violence, and physical violence. So this very chatbot was developed in order to provide or in order to serve as the first responders for those Indonesian female migrant workers who needed help when the embassy wasn't available. There is also the initiatives that it is developed in Bahasa Indonesia and also a select local languages. So the Indonesian female migrant workers were consulted during the initial development, and they identified what are the languages that they most spoke with. And I think the thing that I want to highlight is that while the migrant workers were consulted during the initial design, it is important to ensure that their involvement is a continued process during the evaluations of the platforms, and the oversight process is also essential. Next. So what are the opportunities and the challenges? And if I can be honest, it's mostly challenges and least about opportunities. So next, the first one is about the illegality of data scraping. We've heard a lot during this morning sessions, as well as from the previous presentations, that we do have data protections laws. Yet, the practice of data scraping is one of the big challenges for our data protection law. So in the previous presentations, I've already mentioned on how generative AI models are commonly trained on a large data sets from publicly available information and user data. And unlike conventional and traditional AI, generative AI lacks a specific context or purpose. So they usually are designed to be able to be implemented in various users, in various contexts. So it is very rarely that they have a specific context or purpose in mind when developing a generative AI based on large language models. So in this scenario, data scraping arguably violate data protection principles outlined in our data protection law, particularly the principles of data minimizations and proportionality. These principles are common. I think it's mostly are seen and can be observed from other regions as well. And in the following sections, on the regulatory challenges sections, I will deep dive in more detail about what specific provisions that this practice might violate the PDP law. Next. So AI hallucinations. Some of you may have come across to AI hallucinations, which refers to situations where generative AI, like chatbots, typically based on LLMs, produce inaccurate or entirely fabricated content altogether. So in the context of Satu Sehat and Sari, users seeking legal advice or medical advice from these chatbots could face harmful consequences if they depend on misleading information. This issue is especially concerning for vulnerable population in Indonesia who may lack the critical digital literacy skills needed to verify AI-generated content. And the next challenge is language inclusivity, and this is closely connected to the AI hallucinations earlier. So AI training data is predominantly trained on high resource language like English. So for us, Southeast Asian nations who speak low resource language are at risk of receiving inaccurate AI-generated content. So Ibu Monica in the earlier session in the morning mentioned that Indonesia alone has 1,000 local language, and we can only imagine how diverse we are in Southeast Asia, even though there are several initiatives trying to bridge that gap, like Sea Lion that was mentioned earlier by Karryl, as well as in Indonesia, there is also an initiative called Sahabat AI that was developed by a private company. So this concern actually has been confirmed by a 2024 study conducted by Armed University in Vietnam that revealed AI chatbots gave inaccurate information or medical advice when asking about a certain disease in Vietnamese language. So there is a growing body of research documenting this harm, and I think Indonesia should follow on that as well. And next, the last challenges, but also a little bit opportunities, I think, in this slide is pertinent to crisis communication. This aspect is particularly relevant to SARI, as chatbots offer a unique opportunity for individuals to feel more comfortable sharing personal and sensitive issues with them rather than with humans. However, this is still raising concerns around privacy and security, given the sensitive nature of personal data that the users share. Another significant concern is access. So various factors may create obstacles for individuals seeking to use chatbots during emergencies. So we, in the strategic dialogue sessions, I think, or was it the Ibu Mutia Hafiz herself, who said that there is a macro level concerns that pertains on access, how several factors like socioeconomic factors can also contribute to establishing barriers on access. So if we come back to the data from Komnas Perempuan, we see that many of the victim of abuse is actually illegal workers that are coming from a lower socioeconomic backgrounds and often struggle with reading and writing. So this might be a challenge for access. Next part is regulatory challenge. I will discuss very briefly because I've already got the notification of time limitation. The first one is about AI next. So in AI, in addition to what Karryl has provided earlier, we just had a circular letter of soft law approaches in Indonesia, which came out on 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And the only drawbacks from this circular letter is borrowing Prof. Ang's words earlier. It's quite useless because it's non-binding nature. Next, so data protections. There are two main themes that are very important when we discuss about how data protection laws in Indonesia applied to AI, or particularly generative AI. The first one is that we need to establish legal basis of processing, and our PDP law mirrors the EU GDPR on the 6 legal bases needed when AI developers want to train the data based on personal data. And in this paper, you will find an explanation on why it is very difficult to apply these 6 legal bases when it comes to AI development. And the second one is about right to transparency. So our PDP law mandates that data controllers have to provide transparency in the way they process data, including personal data. And the derivatives regulation that is still in the finalization process define transparency as making data subjects aware of how data processing works and its methods. The only problem with generative AI is that because it employs the machine learning and the deep learning methodology, it is very complex to understand or to explain how this works to users more generally. Next, recommendations. Next. So this is the last line. I have several recommendations that I propose, but I'm also very curious to hear from the audience about the recommendations. So the first one is we need to transition to binding legal framework. Second, we need to make a guidance for AI developers on establishing legal basis for data processing. And the third one, we need to introduce algorithmic audit as part of the mandatory data protection impact assessment already mandated under PDP law. And the fourth one is we need to ensure that all of this process are conducted with multi-stakeholder participation. And lastly, we need to establish independent regulatory bodies that regulates AI and that facilitates governance mechanism for community oversight. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thank you so much. Looking forward for the discussions.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Alia, I'll invite Surachanee for accompanying Alia as well. Check. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'll open up for Q&A session if there's anyone. I believe there's none online. Offline audience, raise your hand. But over there. Raise your hand again so that my friend notice. Finan, satu. Dua over there. Okay. Another one. A last question. Okay, seeing none, please proceed.
Again, thank you so much for the presentation. And because I'm from Sagun, I'm doing a lot of work as well when it comes to engaging community policy making and oversight. Both of the presentation really make me reflecting, and I was wondering, like, would it be too bold to say that digital insecurities has been so normalized, and to the point that perhaps the large community would be less aware with the fact that they're vulnerable with their privacy? And to that, I was wondering how then we, as civil society community, could make sure that we could put that into the discourse to make people become having more community consciousness and awareness that, hey, your right has been taken from you. Because everything has been so normalized to the point that people are no longer think that it's something tiring, the fact that the government have all their data and surveilling them 24/7. So what do you think of that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we go to the second question. And I believe that first question leads to both of the speakers.
Okay. Good afternoon. Hello. My name is Naomi. I'm from communication department. So basically, I have two questions. In this digital era, I think it's nearly impossible to us use platform without concern to share our personal data. Actually, we already aware that we have to share our personal data, but sometimes we have a need to use. My question is, do we really have a choice to refuse this platform, or has our reliance on digital tools forced us to become data source for corporation? That's the first question. The second one is about surveillance capitalism. So I just learned about regulation class today. Is it on? Okay. From the capitalism. So actually, how does surveillance capitalism place us in this position? And are current regulations sufficient to protect our rights, or are they merely ineffective formalities? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That goes to both of the speakers, right? Okay. Please. Yeah.
I'll go first so that I get the first cut of the idea, and then you got put in the top position. I guess that's a very. I think I can try and answer both of your questions in the same thing, because I think it's kind of interrelated as well. I'll start with your question about, do we really have a choice, right? No. Sorry, I wish I have better answer, but really in reality, as individual internet user, you're kind of not really have much choice. If you, like you mentioned, if you really have to use that platform, right, you really don't have much choice but agree to what type of data that they want to collect from you. But another way around, I think the collective of people, right, or the collective of CSO can play a role in this type of thing. Because if we're really being realistic, right, you have this big tech company and platform, right? Who would you use to go up against this platform? Usually it's the people you hate, aka the government, right? You don't trust them, but you can use them, right? You're the voters, right? So in one way, now I'm talking like political scientists, but in one way, don't see your government as your enemy, but see them as your instrument. Because every election, they use you anyway. So, might as well play this psychological game with them as well. Because in reality, it's the government that produce policy and generate policy, right? So one way is you can try to leverage against your government, but I would be careful about that as well, because we talk about soft law and hard law and ethics, things like that, right? Sometimes government and policy makers have good intention, but they just don't know better, right? That's one thing. So I'm kind of still on the fence about whether or not we should push for harder and more binding regulations on platform and platform accountabilities. That said, something like the European Union GDPR could also be a reference point, but not a copy-paste, right? That's a difference, because GDPR, if you read it, it does not fit in Southeast Asian context whatsoever. If you have not read it, you should go read it. It does not fit in Southeast Asian context, right? But it's a good baseline of how government or collective of government, say ASEAN, right, can leverage against tech company, because that's basically our only choice, right? Goes to your point about how CSO can play a role and also empower the marginalized community, right? Again, I think I'll go back to the importance of public and private partnership, right? And also the role of CSO in that regard as well. nowadays in this reality, it's not enough for CSO and activist group and NGOs to work alone in this landscape anymore. And not to mention that, I don't know if you guys are in Indonesia, NGOs landscape is affected by the US tariff and also the withdrawal of USAID funding. But it was in Thailand, we're really affected. The NGOs, be it from humanitarian perspective all the way to digital rights perspective, have been affected, right? So we're cash strapped, we're resource strapped, right? Not enough capacity to work on this alone, right? So one thing is to cultivate trust. If you have not already, cultivate trust with government and state agencies. Become more involved in policy making or consultation processes, right? And then the trust can snowball from there, and that's how you get your reach to get to marginalized population and deliver different things, different courses or public awareness that you hope to get to. Otherwise, you will not get there. So basically, short answer to both of your questions is, don't see your government as the enemy, but use them wisely. That makes sense.
A round of applause for that. I think that's like deserved, and a round of applause. Okay, so the first questions on how we can increase awareness on the impact of technology, particularly on AI. I think what we can do as a civil society organizations is keep on discussing what is wrong and what went wrong when this technology remains unregulated in Indonesia. The government is currently publishing a consultation on the white paper of AI roadmap published by Komdigi, and they are now asking for inputs from the people, from the community, and we can use that as a way to increase awareness of the government, because seeing from the white paper that they published, most of the risk outlined and identified in this white paper is not reflecting what are the problems, what are the real problems in Indonesia. I'll take the example of the use of AI to generate intimate image or videos in Indonesia. It has been going on for a lot of years, since 2021 even, where there are a group chatbot in Telegram where people can request the moderators of those Telegram groups to generate images or videos of people just by providing their pictures or their social media links. And very recently this case emerged again in, unfortunately, in my alma mater in Bali, where there is a student, high university students, who are expelled because the Satgas PPKS, I don't know how to translate that, task force in the university found that he is proven to create or generate intimate images by using AI. So we need to keep talking, documenting, and transferring this knowledge to the government so that they are aware. And for the brightest young men in the room, I think it is very important that we critically interrogates our relationship with technology. So I think when there is a saying that goes, when you're not paying for it, that you are the product of it. So I think we need to actually investigate what that means. So if I'm not paying for Instagram, Meta, or whatever social media there is, we need to start questioning what are the costs that we are actually paying. And for generative AI, I think the biggest problem now, because we are in the climate crisis, situation. It was already outlined by Professor Ang earlier about sustainability. What we can do to actually increase awareness that the use of AI actually is a power-hungry system. And we're seeing that there are plans being made to make lots of data centers in Indonesia because there's nothing left in Southeast Asia. I think the problem already emerged in Malaysia because they started to create data centers there. So I think we need to also first educate ourselves and start speaking about what are the true costs of our ChatGPT conversation, for example. And the second one is about, I think the second and the last question is actually related, and I will try to answer it in a one go. It feels impossible to use a digital platform now without handing over our personal data, sorry. And I would say that I think it is more about an implementation problem, oversight problem. Because like we said earlier, our PDP law largely mirrors GDPR. Well, it's not really, but there are the main provisions are quite similar with EU GDPR, but the problem is that it's not being implemented enough. 3 years after the data protection law has been passed, we still don't have the supervisory body. We don't have the derivatives regulation, which means most of the regulations in the data protection laws remains unimplementable. And related to the ineffective formalities, I think from the last questioners, I think this is the problem with the data protection law in Indonesia, but also largely in the region, that even though that data protection law applies to both private and public sectors, the ineffectiveness of the implementation and oversight is oftentimes very heavily only towards the private sector and not to the state actors. And the problem, particularly one related to the supervisory body. So while EU GDPR mandates a truly independent data protection supervisory authority, we know that it's not the case in Indonesia. So if we see on our data protection law, the supervisory body is under, it is still unclear, but most likely it would be under the Ministry of Digital Communication and Digital Affairs. And through this way of governance mechanism, we see that they need to comply, but they also are the one who supervised. So it's illustrating the point of you are the player, you are the soccer player, but you're also the referee in a way. So this create a very imbalances during the implementation.
Jake, okay. I thank you very much for the brief answers from both of the speakers. Give a round of applause to all of our speakers. I think I can conclude that there are a lot of types of regulating or regulations in digital space. However, there are several trade-offs regarding when you want to be a soft law approach or whether you want to be that hard approach. There's always tensions between them and ways to navigate it. When it comes to civil society, that doesn't mean that the burden bears by the civil society, but it's more of our collective actions to sort of like criticize what we are doing on the net, but also to criticize what the other development issues of digital technology in the region. I think that goes with a bottom-up and also top-down approach in seeing this particular issue. With that, I think that concludes our afternoon session. Again, thank you very much for all of our speakers, and I thank you all for the audience for bear with us for the last 2 hours, and it's good to hear from the participative audience through the questions that were being raised the last 1-2 hours. With that, I thank you very much again, and I believe there's a QR code for the audience for you to access the e-certificate if you need it. And also, that sums up everything. Thank you very much. A round of applause for all of us here. I think, just to conclude, we need several documentations for sure, for all the speakers and also the audience. Gimana ini fotonya? Oh, madep sana. Okay. Please stand up. Bangun atau... Oh, berdiri semua? Kelihatan? Okay. Everyone, please stand up for our documentation. So all the speakers will be in front, and we face there, yeah, towards the photographer. Photographers will be here. Mohon bisa bangun supaya kita foto lebih jelas. Belum semua. Ya makanya, duduk. Oh ini speakersnya juga ya. Maaf boleh duduk, ternyata nggak kelihatan. Please have a seat. I'm just gonna grab 2 chairs. Udah. Oke. Nggak usah. Aku yang mandu aja. Oke, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All smile everyone. Senyum. Mungkin mau ganti gaya, ada tangan-tangannya gitu. Change. Gaya bebas, freestyle. Oke, thank you so much. Terima kasih banyak semuanya. Yeah. Enjoy your afternoon and evening all. Thank you.